I think it's no secret to anyone, considering the majority of the content of this channel, that I like horror games. Games and movies. And the latter, to me, is admittedly a guilty pleasure because 99% of horror movies are absolute shit, as opposed to the slightly lower figure of 95% for video games. But yeah, too bad for me. Being a horror fan with standards is a miserable reality, and so the best I can do is to keep going back to the classics. I'm sorry, I just don't have the fanboy gene in me. You could have made the best thing in the world in the past, but if you make something new that is not good, then I'm either gonna shit on it for fun or ignore it altogether.
Boys, we are
playing this remake.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm not getting out of this chair.
But anyway, in terms of horror, it is my firm belief that the original Silent Hill games 1, 2, 3, and 4 have not been dethroned at this even after 26 years. The uncountable amount of games that try to emulate its horror have, in my honest opinion, gotten close, but they have fallen short of capturing the essence of these games. Granted, I haven't played every horror game in existence since then, so I can't say if there is some game here or there that did it. Some of these games are good for sure, but to me, they clearly lack some fundamental thing or another. I'm not gonna assume they were attempting to be the OG Silent Hill killers, but for someone who wanted more of that experience and was looking for games inspired by them, none of them have hit the spot. Even Silent Hill 4 managed to do it, despite being very different compared to the first 3 games. No other horror game has managed to be as unsettling in pretty much everything, from sound design to art style, from its depiction of hell to the terrifying implications its events have for its own universe and the characters within, and how relatable it is also to real people, to our experience as human beings in life and beyond. So how did a ragtag team of developers Konami had little hopes for, who were tasked with making a competitor to Resident Evil, managed to create 3 masterpieces in a row for their very first games, and the 4th one, which although is very flawed, still dwarfs pretty much every other horror game out there. I don't know how to describe this phenomenon other than a true lightning in a bottle, which created a brand of horror that may as well be irreplicable. So let's explore why Silent Hill's approach to this was so unique. Playing these games as a kid, back then it was just not doable. There were parts where I couldn't do it and had to watch my brothers play it for me, especially when the other world kicked in. My brother back then described it to friends as, "It's like Resident Evil, but it frightens you." Somehow I still remember this. This phrase stuck out to me. What did he mean by that? Because Resident Evil did frighten us. Resident Evil 2 was full of moments like this, and these would make us pause the game and turn off the console. But he used that word in particular to try and describe something unique that Silent Hill did. And playing and replaying these games dozens of times made me notice something. They somehow still scare me. Not to the same degree, but there's still one quality about them that remains no matter how many times I play them, or how much I know about these games from start to finish. There's something about these games that cannot be overcome. At least my brain can't. Jump scares are overcomeable, as are spooky noises, gore, monsters, shock horror, whatever. I've overcome those over the years. I barely get scared at horror games anymore, but the horror that Silent Hill provides proved to be deeper and more primal than that, which is why I can't overcome it. You can't get used to everything in this world, apparently. The part where I couldn't play it out of fear, that I had to put down the controller, pause the game to regain my bearings, ask my brother to take the wheel, that part I overcame. I mostly chill when I play them, but it's the unnerving part that I find not possible to overcome. The psychological horror part starts to weigh on my mind over time, to the point that I need to stop playing after 1 or 2 hours, not because I'm scared, but because my mood starts to change. I wonder, am I the only one who feels like this when playing these games? I don't know, but I know that it's only these games that do this to me, so there's something special going on there. What is different about them? them compared to other horror games. Hell, even compared to other psychological horror games. But we need to know what psychological horror means. So Silent Hill is psychological horror, right? And to my knowledge, the first games of this genre. There could have been others before it, but Silent Hill was the one to kick this genre off into notoriety in video games. But what even is it? Well, psychological horror is simply horror that comes from the mind. Unlike with monsters and aliens and zombies, all of which come from the outside of one's mind, in psychological horror, the scary things come from within. It uses the instability of the characters' minds to try and unsettle the audience. That's it, it's that simple. But I don't like this definition. I can't do anything about it, but it's frustrating. This whole subgenre of horror is frustrating. I have enough fingers in my hands to count the amount of psychological horror media I like, and the 4 original Silent Hill games are 4 of those fingers. Jacob's Ladder is the 5th finger. Session 9 is the 6th. And that's it. And why does this genre frustrate me so much? Because it's in its nature to be frustrating. When watching a movie or playing a psychological horror game, in 99% of them, you don't know what's real. You don't know if your character is hallucinating shit, if he's in a coma, if he's dead and going through purgatory. Things are always moving from one space to the next. The characters, they are warped from place to place. There is no stable ground that they can stand on, and neither does the audience. It's all an exploration of the character's psyche. And truth be told, I think Silent Hill spoiled me, because it succeeds at doing something most other psychological horror media fails at, which to me is the whole point of the subgenre of horror. Silent Hill, instead of being just a psychoanalytic therapy session for its characters, messing with their minds, the most important part is that it messes with the player. Yes, it also messes with the audience. Not just the characters' minds. The reason why psychological horror does this so much is because it's easier to mess with your mind if it messes with the mind of the characters. If everything is originated from the mind of a character super unreliably, where the laws of physics don't matter, something that allows for easier manipulation of devices to make you scared, than if the author was bound by the laws of reality, then in theory it should be easier to disorient the audience, right? But the problem with that is, in practice, rarely does it ever work. It just turns into a fever dream. The game, the movie, whatever, gets lost in the whole psychology thing and forgets that the whole point of it all was to disturb you, the audience. They forget that the true point of psychological horror and what truly separates it from traditional horror is that instead of trying to scare you with jump scares and blood and gore and spiders and ghosts, blah blah blah, the psychological kind, when it's done properly, is not so much supposed to scare you, but more so to disturb, to unnerve, to induce unpleasant states of mind, rather than just shock you or jolt you with a scare. The psychological variant is supposed to go the extra mile, to mess with your psyche in a way that's more deliberate and directed. Games, then, in my opinion, they are a better medium for this, because the gameplay, being an interactive experience, allows for more possibilities to be carried out than in movies where you just sit and watch, or books where you just read words. Let me give you an example of what I consider psychological horror from a different game. And excuse any mistakes here, it's been a while since I've played this game, and I also have no footage of my own, so credits to this channel here. In Hollow Body, you play as a girl who's looking for her friend in a city that was ravaged by a disease. This game, for the most part, is pretty down to earth. The enemies are mutants. You don't go to dreamland or anything like that. It's all taking place in a realistic setting. But there's this one part that is pure psychological horror. As you explore the city, you go into a church, and in the underground section of this place, you start to collect some items that are very uncharacteristic for this game. You find some hearts that you can collect. Yes, the actual organ, not upgrades or anything like that. Early Earlier you saw a strange machine, and if you put two and two together, you conclude that these hearts are parts of a puzzle you assemble on this machine. But once you arrive at the location where the fourth heart is supposed to be, something strange starts to happen. The music becomes horrifying. This scared the crap out of me. I was readying my weapons, expecting something to arrive. I also noticed something funny about the walls. It's like they were bleeding, but I wasn't sure if it was always like this. I didn't pay attention to the wall textures up to this point, so I got really on edge and started questioning myself. Then I started running away, making my way back to the machine. But wait a moment, what? This hallway? I don't remember a hallway being this long. What's going on here? And it just goes on and on and on. And then it finally dawned on me. Oh shit, I'm stuck in an endless loop. What the fuck do I do? Do I turn back? I look at the map and everything seems fine. So what am I supposed to do now? So I keep going down this seemingly endless dark hallway while this dreadful music is still playing. I don't know if something's gonna emerge from the darkness in front of me and attack me at any point, but then it just ends. I reach somewhere and I ascend, and both me and the character realized that those hearts I'd been collecting, they were not real. This whole segment was some fucked up psychological thing this game put in here completely out of nowhere, in a game where there was no sign of anything supernatural going on up to that point. This curveball the game threw at me was a complete mindfuck. It was messing with the character for sure. We could see her reactions to what was happening, but more than the character, I was being fucked with. I did not know what to expect. For a moment I was in a state of confusion, and in that confusion my brain went to the fight or flight response automatically. And if you attempt to go back down that hallway after all of that is over, the hallway was in fact real. It was just that long, but the way this was all set up was so well done that the game manipulated me into thinking that I was stuck in an endless hallway loop. The game successfully manipulated my mental state, and that, to me, is psychological horror. As I said in my previous video, and bear with me for a second as I repeat this for potential new viewers, contrary to more traditional ways of doing horror, which employ, for instance, lots of loud jump scares, panic moments that are followed by intense relief after the situation is resolved, as well as the explicitly shocking imagery that I just mentioned. Psychological horror does it in a different way, or at least the way it's supposed to when it's properly executed. So I'll stop talking about psychological horror in general, something that is more miss than hit, and I'll focus on Silent Hill's brand of it because it's the thing that does it best. Silent Hill's horror is far more daring in a sense. It keeps you in a state of dread constantly, without relief. There are no safe rooms with soothing music for you to relax after going through a long stretch of horror out of your comfort zone. The most you'll get are rooms where you can save, but they are in absolute silence, a very uncanny silence. There are far less jump scares and far less moments of intense relief, therefore. You are kept feeling unnerved through most, if not all, the games. If I had to make a graph to illustrate this comparison, it would be more or less something like this. So you just rip away the relief and you have only tension in varying degrees. That's because Silent Hill focuses on delivering an experience of terror over horror. Terror is the dread of anticipation, the suspicion of something bad to come, while horror, it is the direct experience of that thing or its after effects. The anticipatory part is so much more important in Silent Hill that you can even strip away the scare part entirely, and it still works. The beauty of these games is in creating this anticipation. For that, they have to do a little fuckery with your mind in subtle and also not so subtle ways. As author Paul Well Wells puts it in his book The Horror Genre From Beelzebub to Blair Witch, quote, "The most persuasive horror is the one suggested in the mind of the viewer rather than that which is explicitly expressed on the screen," end quote. What is conjured by the imagination has the potential to be far worse than anything you can see or hear with your senses. Silent Hill is this type of horror. It is far more implied than explicit, far more suggestive than commended. It's for this reason that making good psychological horror is not an easy task. Putting cheap shock value stuff like bugs and gore in your game is easy. Jump scaring you with zombies screaming in your face is easy. What's not easy is curating a horror game accurately enough to nudge the player's imagination where you want it to go, finessing it to create the experience and make it adequately effective, and at the same time not too much for it to become a movie game or a walking sim with no player choice or maneuverability whatsoever. It makes it even crazier to think that Team Silent pulled it off in the first games they ever made, in their first attempts, and they were also the first true psychological horror games ever made, to my knowledge. The horror overall in these games is much more insidious than what you might find in a Resident Evil or any other horror game, so we'll go over many things. I'll be covering all I can think of, from features to design choices to specific moments and set pieces. The first thing that sets Silent Hill apart from every single psychological horror game that came after it and inspired by it is how grounded everything is. Every psychological horror game that came after it feels like a fever dream, an acid trip, because they're not grounded in a sense. Take Lost in Vivo, for instance, a game that scared the shit out of me back in the day. It's a hallway simulator. Not like PT, no. Not a literal hallway walking sim, but in the sense that you are always progressing from one area to the next. There's almost zero backtracking in these games. The level design is just going forward linearly with one or two offshoots here and there. But what I want to say is games like this feel like a fever dream because you're in a constant state of flux. You're always moving on from one space to the next, be it by walking or just warping around, being teleported from one new space to another like Silent Hill F did all the time. Pay attention to that word I used here. Space. A space in this context is something that exists virtually. It isn't there forever, nor is it situated in any specific coordinate in the real world. It doesn't have a set scale, and it can appear and disappear, as well as change at any point. Silent Hill is not a space, it is a place. It's a real town in the game's universe that you get to explore each time. This town, being a place, anchors the experience. If I were to compare it to music, it's like how each chord progression in traditional music always comes back to the tonic of its key, or how a piece goes back to the chorus after visiting other places like a verse or a solo. In much the same way, each time you enter a building in Silent Hill, for instance, and you're done exploring and doing what you have to do there in that dungeon, you go back to the streets as they were before. It anchors you in reality, which makes these games feel believable. They're not just a hallucination or a bad dream like the latter goofy entries like F make you think. It's baffling to me how rare this is in psychological horror media. There are some instances where these games put you in a space that doesn't exist in the real world, like the 4th floor of El Camilla Hospital in 1, the inside of the clock tower, these tunnels in 3 in the hospital. But the game always brings you back to the anchored places you already know, except in their final stretches, the nowhere and nowhere-like sections, which is when things start to become really surreal. But setting these aside, even when you traverse the labyrinth in 2, somewhere that's not a real place but purely a psychic space manifested by the other world, at the end of it, you just pop back out at the surface, back to the good old Silent Hill you're familiar with. This immediately re-anchors you. In Silent Hill 4, the most fever dreamish of the originals, where you barely visit the town, it also does this to an extent. Can you guess how? Which place do you keep revisiting over and over that's conveyed as somewhere in the real world? Yes, if you guess room 302, Henry's apartment, you got it. Henry visits Walter's other worlds in each mission, quote unquote, but he always goes back to his apartment at the end, or whenever you need to save. You can see the city through the windows and eavesdrop and peek into your neighbors' lives as they go about their days. So although you're technically stuck in a separate dimension, the feeling the game gives the player is that it takes place in a real world location. But there's something else that's important. It's how the characters interpret their situation. Every character in Silent Hill talks like they're an outsider to their predicament, save for the crazy cultist ones, and when they're just finally losing their minds. They don't get caught in the flux, so to speak. Even in Silent Hill 1, the most unclear of all Silent Hills, when it comes to what's really going on with the town, the characters react appropriately to their predicament. Harry is perfectly lucid and self-aware, at times even acknowledging that this might be all just a bad dream he's having, in one of the most haunting lines he utters in the game. Like a dreamer realizing they're dreaming, sometimes the characters act too rational for their own good, even.
Darkness devouring the town. Must be on drugs.
These behaviors also remind you that Silent Hill is a real place with real people in it. Even when Harry gets yanked out of reality to talk to Lisa in a dream sequence, they talk about the town itself, its history and gossip. They're not talking about vague psychological stuff. They're not trying to do that artsy-fartsy prose or poetry that every psychological horror walking sim does. It's just down-to-earth communication. This all makes it so, despite the acting being deliberately Lynchian in its odd pacing, full of long pauses, it still feels real. Of course, this is important for Silent Hill. After all, the town is the most important character. Or at least it was before Konami decided to resurrect the corpse of this franchise and defile it beyond recognition. But yeah, it's the only psychological horror franchise that I know that does proper world building, so it's interesting to play. You're not just focusing on the characters and their trauma. Even Silent Hill 2 does world building, the most character-centric game. It's still interesting to learn about the town in it. The first game, the debut game. Well, if I had to sum up Silent Hill 1 in a few keywords, well, it's dark, desolate, and unknown. The first thing you'll see when you boot up the game is a disclaimer warning message about the game containing violent and disturbing images. The keyword here is disturbing because while Resident Evil focuses on the violence and gore of things, the Silent Hill games mention violence and disturbance or cruelty in the later games. Very early but subtly implying the emotional or mental aspect of the horror as opposed to it being explicit and physical. The intro in this game sums up the mood perfectly. The crusty crackling before the music kicks in subcommunicates this. This game is gonna be raw and eerie over outright scary and in your face. The mandolin and demented guitar by Akira Yamaoka using lots of diminished chords with tritones and minor second intervals, which are some of the most dissonant sounding intervals in music, also help to sell the rawness of this old, unknowable horror that awaits. The first thing you'll notice when you actually take control of Harry is, aside from the graphics being very old, which honestly adds to the unknowable, ambiguous horror which I'll be talking about, is the fog. The fog, the single most iconic thing in the franchise, which makes everyone say Silent Hill in whatever stream they watch whenever fog comes up in a video game. To say that this was defining is an understatement. The fog is the single most perfectly placed fruit of circumstance, if you can call it that, in any video game that I can think of. You all know the story, right? The limited hardware of the PS1 could not allow for a big environment such as a town to be rendered without tanking the frame rate to near zero, so to hide the short rendering distance, they masked it with fog. A lot of games did this in this era, but only Silent Hill used it for the purpose of horror as well. The fear of the unknown is an umbrella that encapsulates many different fears, one of them being the fear of what you can't see.
ゾクゾクするというか、不安でしょうがない、わからないと、自分の、周りにちょっと先に何者かいるかもしれない、そこにいるモンスターがそれどんなやつなのかもわからない、とにかくわからないことっていうのが怖いことだと思いますね。
The man laid it bare for us. The formula is pretty simple: an implied danger plus a lack of information. The fog, which serves to hide anything further than 3 meters away from you in any direction, does not allow for any threat to be seen before it's already too close. This also happens when it's dark, obviously. Even more so then, because the darkness in this game is really, really dark. You cannot see anything that's not within the halo of Harry's flashlight, whose light is not shaped like a beam, but is instead dispersed like an area light. This makes the darkness seem like it's engulfing, much like the fog. By the way, Silent Hill 2 and 3, they literally do this. A good part of the darkness is actually fog, but Silent Hill 1 didn't have to add that because the dither rendering aesthetic already did a pretty good job of obscuring things in the distance within the darkness. Going on a little tangent here, the thing that bothers me whenever I watch someone play this game is that they don't know, or they don't bother to change the emulator's settings so that it looks the same as it did in the original PS1 version. All you have to do, for instance in DuckStation, is to change the render mode to software. That brings the dither look back and solves the issue of the game popping in the blocks it renders when you run outside during the dark, something that breaks the immersion. But anyway, it's rare to see horror games doing darkness this way. To achieve it, you cannot be able to see anything in the distance. Nothing. In Silent Hill 2 and 3, like I said, they used black fog to ensure your line of sight will remain short, and you can see this clearly in some places where there are light bulbs turned on, but they're obscured by the black fog, only becoming visible when you get close enough. In games like Silent Hill 2 Remake, they didn't give a shit about this, whether intentionally or not, and UE5's shitty Lumen being an unreliable, blotchy piece of shit makes everything visible in the distance, even if they didn't intend for that to happen. Plus, it has a lot of lights and stuff you can see in the distance, so it's nothing like the originals. But there's one point that I haven't seen anyone touch upon. In other games that are dark or have dark sections, because these games do not set the frame for you psychologically that everything is dark, the darkness doesn't feel as oppressive. You know that you're just traversing through a particularly dark area, but since you were somewhere lit up before, you know unconsciously everything is fine. In Silent Hill though, especially 1 and 2, when the town decides to go dark, whether you're in the other world or about to enter it, the darkness is absolute. You know unconsciously there is no light anywhere. Be it indoors or outdoors, there's no relief anywhere. Relief comes only when the town shifts back to normal, but until it does, you know there's nowhere you can go to find that solace of light, that oasis of relief. Thus the uniquely oppressive feeling the Silent Hill darkness gives that no other game has ever done since. This is a big part of why I like 1 and 2 the most, and 3 is likely behind, because 3 is a brighter game overall. Even in the other world, sunlight is present in places. You could argue they were expanding the mechanics of Silent Hill as to not be so limited creatively, but in doing so, it lost a little bit of that magic. That being said, the PS2 games were a little more flexible here. There are some particular rooms that are darker than others. The first floor of Woodside Apartments is noticeably brighter. You can see far ahead, and it was needed because the first time you traverse this place, you don't have the flashlight on you. The second floor, though, is just engulfed in darkness. I do prefer how the darkness looks in the first game, but the way the sequels tinker with this is pretty well done because it creates contrast. Having you traverse a not so dark area first, getting you used to that, only to thrust you into a really, really dark place. It's unexpected and reaches a momentary stress level higher than if everything was equally as dark. Silent Hill 1, when it came out, had one big difference compared to Resident Evil, and that was its camera. While in Resident Evil, all the backgrounds were pre-rendered and the cameras were absolutely static, the hybrid fixed camera Silent Hill introduced to survival horror, thanks to it having fully 3D backgrounds rendered in real time, was one of the greatest contributors to what Team Silent achieved. The freaky camera angles that twist around for one in the first game are very iconic, so much so that they replicated that in the movie. They really took Dutch angles to a new level here. As you may know, their purpose is to cause a sense of instability and thus tension. The camera in most areas follows you around freely, and only in certain rooms they switch to being fully authored by being either absolutely or partially fixed. And when they do this, when it's not to highlight important things you need to look at, it's almost always for psychological reasons. Take the locker room in the elementary school, for instance. You enter the room and you can hear loud thumping just out of view because the camera is looking at you from the corner. You can't see the source of the noise, even if you mash the left trigger as much as you want to try and move the camera. Plus, it's a new sound. You've never heard this before up to this point. Again, the formula for fear of the unknown is an implied threat plus a lack of information. The nature of the noise takes care of the first part, and the camera not allowing you to see it takes care of the second. Look at all these angles. The camera refuses to let you see what's causing this noise, only by turning around the corner and approaching the noise, at which point it would be in your face already. Will it finally reveal that it's coming from inside a tiny locker? After you open it, a cat busts out and walks again out of view into the darkness. It slides the door open and a horrible noise is heard. You cannot see any of this. Whatever imploded that cat, you'll only see after you open the door, at which point it'll already be in your face. So anticipation is created. The player would not feel so good about opening that door now. In the other world, a very similar set piece plays out, but we'll hold that for later. You have a certain degree of control over the camera in some places, like the outdoors, in the first 3 games, but it's not quick and snappy and utterly free like an over-the-shoulder camera. By pressing the left trigger, you can make the character look around, which points the camera to the spot they're looking at. But depending on how cramped the space is around you, the camera itself may not have enough space to turn. Plus, using this function and fighting feels really awkward. At least to me, it's not a very natural combination of button presses in a third-person survival horror. So when I do this, I feel like I'm losing control a bit. So the anticipation it causes whenever you want to turn around in a room where the radio is blasting static because there's enemies, either behind you or off to the side, is unbeatable. It still gets me to this day. That moment when you are about to see the monster that's threatening you, when the camera is turning around, that still gives me chills, because I can't be sure of how close or how many or what type of threat is present until I see it with my eyes. The anticipation of this reveal is what gives me goosebumps, opposite to an over-the-shoulder camera that gives you full control, allows you to move, maneuver, fight, and evade without forfeiting any control whatsoever, which got rid of those goosebumps that I can't help but feel in the original. The original Silent Hill camera is peculiar. It can help you if you know what you're doing, but sometimes it intentionally works against you, because in other games where the camera is clunky, since in those games you have control of it 90% of the time or more, it feels like the camera is failing because of technical reasons, because it's old, but ultimately it's there to help you. But in Silent Hill, because all the fixed camera angles have intent behind them, whenever the camera decides to work against you, it doesn't feel like it's a problem, but that the camera is doing this to you intentionally. Like I said in the Thief video, this intentionality behind things in a game's world creates a presence. Whatever the identity of this presence is, can be intentionally determined determined by the devs. When it's done badly, it reveals the presence of the devs in the game, breaking immersion. But when it's done properly, like it was done in Thief and in Silent Hill, it implies the presence of something from the game's world. In the case of Thief, it's the characters in that world. But in the case of Silent Hill, it feels like it's something more sinister. Let us go over some of these set pieces so I can illustrate and clarify what I mean. One moment that is very well known is the big stretch of running from the observation deck to South Vale at the beginning of the second game. There are some creepy camera angles as James runs down the trail in the forest. The camera goes behind trees on angles that cover all sides, jumping around. At the same time, you can hear some creature stalking you. This all put together makes it seem like something is lurking just behind the tree line from every side, watching James. It's a subtle way to create the feeling of being completely exposed and observed. The camera by default here works against you if you don't try to adjust it. It just points towards James, not letting the player see what's ahead of him as James bolts down this creepy trail. This is one of the many instances where the camera is acting maliciously towards the player character. James is not the only victim of this, as we'll see. But before I go to the next example, for those of you who don't know, here's what Team Silent says about this part.
一度その街に着いたら引き返せないような距離を出すことによってその孤独感とか不安感とかその隔離された街に来てしまったっていう感じとかっていうのを出したかったんでゲーム的にはかなり危険で挑戦してみた部分ではあるんですけどわざとあれだけの距離を
James doesn't want to go back. Look at him. Look at what he says when you try to do that. And so Team Silent made you feel like he does by designing this long, desolate descent you have to run through with him. This is real psychological horror. Plus, this path goes downward, a motif that is used often to portray how James is going deeper and deeper into a metaphorical abyss where the truth lies. And when descending an abyss, it's not certain if you'll ever surface again. The same motif was used in other psychological games like Spec Ops The Line, by the way, where Walker is made to go deeper and deeper into lower physical spaces as his sanity slowly degenerates. The creepy footsteps that James hears stalking him from somewhere behind him later adds a third hostile presence to the crowd. A malicious and sentient presence, because if you stop walking, these footsteps stop as well, as if noticing that you noticed it and stopping not to be caught. This all serves to bug the hell out of the player. I've seen so many players bugged out by this, not knowing if those are their own footsteps or if they're being followed. Ambiguity is also important. The second and third examples are similar, beginning with the most iconic, the Pyramid Head chase in the alternative hospital's basement. The way he just appears behind you with no warning, no loud scary noises, nothing, just his heavy footsteps could be considered a jump scare in itself, which the remake botched as well. I forgot to put that in that video, but look at this. It's now a cutscene. What a joke. Anyway, the fixed cameras coupled with the tank controls make this chase panic-inducing because you're not allowed to see where you're running into. Almost like the camera is an entity, right? Tormenting James. As one viewer put as a very well-made observation in the comments of the Silent Hill 2 remake video, which I encourage you to pause and read, the camera feels like an entity who's trying to make you fail. It's a similar feeling to the one I got watching Skinamarink, a movie where you stare into walls for most of the time, but in one scene in the beginning, the camera starts moving by itself. This has terrifying implications in the context of that movie. And in Silent Hill, it's the same thing. This camera, whatever is making this happen. It's not good. Or at least that's just the uncanny feeling it gives me. The third example is similar. It's in Silent Hill 3. Heather, in the Borley haunted mansion, now has to escape this orange mist that follows her and insta-kills her if it catches up to her. The camera is also actively working against her. So is the narrator, mocking her. And so are the walls, closing to block her path and throw her off so the deadly mist of doom can catch her. All these examples illustrate how the camera is not only an immersive aspect of these games, belonging to their universe as a presence, but it also serves to convey feelings to the player through visual storytelling. I'll give you one example. In Silent Hill 1, in the Otherworld school, Harry sees a trail of gore leading into the men's bathroom. He enters it and sees a shotgun just beyond a closed bathroom stall. He opens it and nothing happens, yet the music escalates. Drums start playing as this corpse hangs above you. You walk in to grab the shotgun and look at the camera angle here. Hanging from above this creepy corpse as Harry slouches down to pick up the weapon. He's completely exposed. What if the corpse reanimates at this moment and decides to drop on you? You're dead. It's an extremely stressful, high-risk situation, accentuated by this camera angle. If you bother to check the wall, it reads, "The monster lurks." When I read this, I wanted to get out of that room immediately, and I was praying that the corpse would not animate and start stalking me around the school. There are many dead bodies hanging around everywhere in these games. Dead bodies are some of the worst things in the inanimate uncanny valley. Their uncanniness, especially if they're framed like this or if they're placed in a dynamic pose, makes them extremely unnerving because they seem like they could come alive to get you at any moment. But we'll come back to more set pieces in a bit. Time for the next point. Now this next thing you might have already heard me talk about, which is the way room separation works in Silent Hill. Much like in Resident Evil, which had that door opening animation to create all the anticipation in the world before you land in the next room, Silent Hill does this also minus the animation, but the most important part of it is the aspect of having each room as a separate space with no seamless connection to one another. You could call this a hardware limitation from back then, but it's another happy accident for the genre, which is gone from every entry starting from Homecoming. The original games, the doors are loading screens, as short as they may be in modern hardware, but still each room becomes a confined space, like its own separate pocket dimension. This contributes to the feeling of oppressiveness and claustrophobia in these games. It increases the perceived distance between each space, allowing for each room to have its own contained and tailored atmosphere. This also makes it possible to surprise the player in different ways. In Silent Hill 3, near the end, there are these rooms which are previously normal looking, but once you get back to them, this shit happens. I'll be honest, just watching this footage gives me chills, even though I've played this game several times. Establishing this level of unpredictability adds tension to the gameplay. You never know what will happen when you enter a room, no matter which room it is. The game lets you know that you are never safe, maintaining that psychological dread constantly. It would be far more complex to do something like this without creating jank and issues in the newer games where every environment is interconnected. In these newer horror games, doors, they are not loading screens anymore. They are just obstacles you run through, just like swinging doors. Might as well not even be there. This makes a building feel like a chunk of maybe 2 or 3 big areas. Everything feels close together, and the atmospheres bleed over from room to room, which means if you're close to a safe room, then you have to run all the way to the other side of the building or to a different floor to feel a difference in atmosphere. While it is is definitely a technical improvement, having bigger maps without loading screens. I mean, the old way of doing things was unquestionably better for horror and atmosphere. And it doesn't matter which type of camera you use. This room separation is also there in Cry of Fear and FPS, and it works pretty well there too. Here's something else Team Silent did to fuck with you. In the first game in the school again, in the other world, the girls' bathroom confuses a lot of people, and it probably confused me too when I was a kid playing this for the first time. The way rooms work in this game allowed Team Silent to make this room teleport you to the second floor. If you're paying attention, you can notice that the loading time here is longer than usual, because it's loading a whole new floor for you. But most people don't realize this, and when they go out, some of them notice, some of them don't. The fact that the door that was there before is now gone, and the hallway is blocked. Those who realize there's something wrong don't know what to do. They think they're stuck, and then they walk into the girls' bathroom again, and without realizing it, they're back to the ground floor. The bathrooms of each floor were merged into one. Nobody says anything, none of the characters comment on this. It's just one odd anomaly that Team Silent put there to make the players question themselves and induce that nagging feeling that there's something off. I don't know what it is, but something doesn't feel right. The resultant tension from the uncertainty generated by traversing these enclosed spaces makes the game more immersive, because it forces your attention back regularly. Every time you're about to open a door, you need to be on your guard. Of course, if you've played these games dozens of times and have everything memorized, the effect is diminished, but before you get to that point, it's great. The more immersed you are in a horror game, the scarier it is. Take PT, for instance, a game you play in first person as well. When you go through that wooden door to loop into a new hallway, the little animation that plays opening and closing it behind you, just that makes the effect feel greater than the one in Cry of Fear where it just goes black for an instant and you're in the next room. Whenever I enter a new loop, the previous place was basically wiped from existence in my mind, or that's the vague impression I got. The new environment is so separated from the previous one because of a simple door opening animation and a noticeable difference in atmosphere that the perceived distance to the previous area becomes so great that it's like I know nothing about it anymore. The game doesn't let me go back, but if it did, I would be on extreme edge because of this. Here, it's only a short animation and a mild atmosphere change, but the more a game stacks these things to make these boundaries more and more noticeable, the more each area feels isolated from the others and vice versa. When doors function as mere swinging doors, this effect is diminished. If you have an open window next to a door, like here, then there's zero environment separation and it feels all like the same room. The more clear the view is between spaces like here with this gate, the lesser the effect. And when a third-person camera can travel from one room to the next like this, the spaces are joined. Even in real life, I feel this. Have you ever asked yourself why old houses are generally spookier than new ones? Well, one of the big reasons is that older houses used to have a lot of doors. Each room was enclosed. There were far less cased openings, which are just doorways without a door, just a frame for decorative purposes. And open concept architecture, in other words, rooms that are merged together like a kitchen and a living room in the same environment, were far less of a thing, if at all. Each little thing like this has a psychological impact on the player, and if you stack them, then you get a real atmosphere. Silent Hill 4 in particular exploits this system to throw a curveball at the player. The ghost victims, they don't stay in their rooms like every other enemy in Silent Hill so far. They can invade the room you're in. When you're exploring, thinking you're safe, this happens. This is nightmare-inducing. It's worse than when zombies decide to open doors in classic RE. Seriously, I've had nightmares with something like this, where I was playing a game and I was in a room I needed to get out of by solving some puzzles. But I knew something was coming. I could hear something coming, getting louder and louder. And if I couldn't get out in time, whatever was to arrive meant certain death. If I ever made a horror game, I would for sure make this a mechanic in it. Not all the time, because it could become annoying, like how I hate stalker-type enemies, but in some situations, oh yes. Also related to space and level design and how these games bug the player by giving them a feeling that something's not quite right. The levels in these games, they have some weird shit going on, like the streets in Silent Hill 1. You're supposed to be exploring a quaint residential neighborhood, but the streets, they are as wide as freeways. Everything is so vast, it feels like you are exposed completely from all sides. In 2, it's the opposite. The streets, they are very narrow and claustrophobic. The hallways in the apartments are unusually long and empty. The prison courtyard, if you look up, it has a fucking ceiling. And the hallways in the labyrinth, they are so tall, stretched upwards beyond logic. So it's not just the creatures and the characters you find that are uncanny. You can also trigger the uncanny valley by making structures that should be familiar to you deform to varying degrees, and environments that should be ordinary have 1 or 2 exaggerated properties. Silent Hill, as I said, is a game about dread or terror over horror, and the sound design and the music are probably the most important things for this. When playing these games, especially 3 and 4, I constantly get chills because of the sounds, the absolute sounds these games make me hear. I can't do anything about it, can't get over it. It's steam silent, prickling my fucking brain, pretty much. So instead of the frequent jump scares, Silent Hill does something else pretty frequently. It ramps up the tension through atmosphere with a crescendo of unnerving music layers, none of them having a definite climax or punchline, if you'll let me call it that, to release the tension. Take this moment in the school, for instance. After you put this silver medallion in the clock tower, what happens to the music is this. It really ramps up out of nowhere in this dark place, and this has been a long build-up which started the moment you unlock the door at the doghouse. By this point, the player's mind is already primed to be paranoid because there's already talk of some beast being set loose around here in this school, and so this build-up fits like a glove. It feels like this bad thing is about to arrive. When you enter the clock tower after finally solving all the puzzles in this area, you're not greeted by silence, much less solace, a break from the tension. No, you're still haunted by the tense music, and there's the demented siren as well. Something you already heard before, and you know what it means. Shit's about to get real. You exit the clock tower, and after a brief cutscene, you're hit with the most terrifying ambience yet. This right here actually made me stop playing as a kid. There's nothing here, dude. Unlike in the regular school part, this otherworld version has no enemies in the courtyard. Yet this place is 10 times more scary because of this music, if you could even call it that. The way it slowly fades in from the silence once again makes it feel like some unspeakable thing is approaching. So simple, yet so effective. Silent Hill 1's soundtrack is underrated because it lacks the amount of of chill, moody themes. You know, the ethereal Portishead-esque music that 2 and 3 have more of, but it has by far, in my opinion, the scariest music pieces of them all. As Silent Hill evolved from entry to entry, its horror music became more and more industrial, noisy, more metallic. The first games though, the words I'd use to describe it are evil, malicious, haunting. The motif of something arriving to get you is also present in some of the other music. The music that plays in the second time you visit the sewers in the other world has this unsettling noise that grows louder until it stops abruptly. Again, even in the music, the game prioritizes the terror, the dread, without giving you a scare at the end. It just goes quiet. The same track escalates aggressively as Harry attempts to flee this place. The sensation is that something horrible is chasing you down this narrow passage, even though there really isn't anything there. Aside from the enemies you might have not killed back there, Silent Hill could very well use music alone to fuck with you, and it would probably work. One more moment. In Alessa's room, just before the final sequence, you get to put the items you've been collecting around nowhere to unlock the last door. As you are putting each item in the door, for each item that you insert, the music ramps up a little. Listen. Anticipation is everything. Dread and then terror. It's the most important part of a scare. So here's the thing, right? Nobody is entitled to a release after a build-up. If a horror creator thinks he or she are indebted to a tension release to satisfy the audience, then the jump scares start to become mandatory. Nobody should kill the tension with nothing after all, right? But jump scares in this way, they get predictable. If you fall into this cycle, the audience will know where every jump scare is gonna be, and then you'll have to start relying on cheap fake outs to try and be unpredictable. How about instead, you keep the tension going, use a jump scare here and there, but most of the time, you don't resolve it. You just lower the tension a bit and then start building it up again. This is the path Silent Hill took, and it works. One of my favorite ways these games fuck with the player is by putting scary music in specific rooms for no apparent reason. Like in the first game, the chemistry storage room, it plays the same unsettling music as in the courtyard for some reason. Even though there are no enemies there. From SH2 onwards, they actually started to add loud, scary music when enemies are nearby along with the radio. So that makes your brain associate loud music with enemies also. And so when they put scary music in a room, even though it's empty, it makes you expect something bad, more so than in the first game. And also, again, taking advantage of the way the rooms are separated. These games sometimes put scary music in a room you've already visited, a room that was relatively safe and quiet before. This is a total mindfuck. It's like the room is telling you, get out, you don't belong here, this is the wrong way or something. Maybe that's what they were going for, to try and redirect you to the right path. And the radio is something that makes these games twice as scary than if they didn't have it. The thing that tells you danger is nearby, but doesn't specify what kind of danger. The formula, again, implied danger and incomplete information or no familiarity. I've tried to play these games with the radio turned off and it's considerably less scary. When I'm able to hear the enemy before the radio starts playing static, which is the case in the demake, it also kills a little bit of the tension because I know what the enemies sound like. I can determine which enemy I'm dealing with by the sound alone, but when the radio is blasting and I can't hear the enemy at all, that's when the dread sets in. When it comes to enemy sounds, the unfamiliarity is also important. There's this moment in Silent Hill 2 where you go through a tunnel in the dark city, and when you're inside you hear these loud ass noises you've never heard before. This little segment is one of the scariest in the whole game, simply from the unfamiliarity effect. Of course, they belong to the Mandarins, which are in fact a new type of enemy at this point. There's something that I noticed Silent Hill 3 does in particular, which is when you go through a door, it starts playing noises from the next room you're about to go in before it's done loading. So you can hear all the wonderfully hellish sounds of whatever enemies you are about to face before you can even do anything. Pretty chilling stuff. Many sounds in this game, they are distortions of the human voice. This is really eerie. For instance, when Pyramid Head swings his sword, sometimes he sounds eerily human. If you pay attention, he actually sounds a little bit like James when he's grunting. The scream James hears before meeting Pyramid Head for the first time is also a human scream, with a high and low pitched tracks merged together to make it sound unnatural. It's a deliberate effort by Team Silent to make these sounds as ambiguous as possible in their nature, and ambiguity is also at play with the fear of the unknown. A lot of times in these games you will hear noises, but these noises, they are ambiguous. You don't know if they're ambience, you don't know if they're normal, if they're abnormal. For instance, when Harry turns on the boiler at the school, this sound plays. It sounds weird. Now, I don't know what a boiler sounds like when it activates. I've never heard that in my life, but it still doesn't sound right. It sounds scary. And guess what? When you go back to that room in the other world and you fight the split head, guess what sound it makes? Yep, the beast was awakened when Harry turned the boiler on, just as it was written in blood in that book. Later, when you lower the drawbridge, there's this weird clanging of machinery. It doesn't sound very friendly to me. But again, I've never been through a drawbridge in real life. I don't know if they're loud like this. Probably not. But it's never clear what this is supposed to be. Same thing when you turn on the generator in the hospital. This weird as fuck sound starts to play. Is this the sound of the generator? Or is this something much worse? An omen of what's to come. In Silent Hill 2, the moth room, you hear this weird noise. Again, in this specific room, what is this supposed to be? I don't know, it's weird. It doesn't sound like anything in particular. It almost does, but it doesn't quite get there. It's extremely menacing though. Again, rising in volume as if something's coming and it's gonna hurt you. In my opinion, SH1 and 2 have the best sound design in the series. Unfortunately, 3 starts using more stock sounds for creatures. And although the previous games also use stock sounds for like doors and Foley noises and stuff, for the monsters, it's an immersion breaker. Silent Hill 4 especially has these generic jaguar noises when you kill the dogs. Or when you fucking hit one of these guys. Yeah, this game is pretty flawed and undercooked, yes. But 3 and 4 give me chills all the time when I play them because a lot of the sound effects you hear that are just there to scare you. They sound different than the rest of the sounds in the game. Louder, deeper, and sometimes they even sound binaural, like way too real. So on and so forth. I actually have to take a break from editing now because these games are heavy on the mind. Even just watching and hearing this stuff in the footage is putting me on edge. Now, the visual art style in the other world, like I said in the past, it's not just a matter of slapping a grunge texture with 50% opacity in overlay mode. It's how Team Silent distributed the grunge. This went over the heads of the director of the Silent Hill movie and anything after Silent Hill 4. The other world in those feels just industrial. That's it. It's rusty like an old abandoned factory with some blood here and there, but the art style had something more to it. There was this demonic or evil, I guess is a better word, aspect to Silent Hill's visuals. One of my favorite recurring motifs that I've never seen anyone else talk about is something that adds to this vile aesthetic, the mirrored textures. As a kid playing this shit, this is one of the things that made the other world impact me the way it did. These mirrored textures, they create pareidolia, which is the phenomenon of seeing familiar things in supposedly meaningless patterns, like a Rorschach test, and also like seeing a smiley face in a power outlet, or this also, I guess. When you mirror abstract patterns, or textures in this case, they frequently end up looking like faces, very distorted ones at that. These things, they look like demonic faces sometimes, like how I showed you earlier. They are incredibly unnatural. When I see these things in Silent Hill, I can't help but think there's some evil at work making things twisted in this way, like there's some intent behind it. Them looking like faces adds to the uncanny feeling the town gives off, like you're being observed at all times. After all, the worst enemy you have to face in this game is the town itself. It's the scariest thing, and this really helps to establish that. It's done subtly in places too, like the texture on the floor of the school's courtyard looks normal here, but in the other world, they become mirrored, more twisted looking. Same with the doors. These subtle changes, maybe you don't notice them the first time you play them, but your unconscious mind probably does and creeps you out for you. These things mess with your head. They make you think, was it like this before? I'm not sure if these things were intentional or if they were just a convenience Team Silent liked to use to save time and resources in texture painting, but I think they are intentional because there are a lot more of those in the other world. There are still some in the normal world, but they're far less present. And I notice even that in the hilltop center in Silent Hill 3 before you flip to the other world in that bathtub room. Look at the textures here. This is just outside that room. It's like they put these mirror textures here intentionally to give a subtle signal that the other world is near, displaying the duality between the two worlds, I guess. And of course, in Silent Hill Origins, you entered the other world through mirrors, literally. Double doors are also mirrored frequently. They look really menacing because of this, and also because they have these windows on them, which are called vision lights, and in Silent Hill they are pitch black. They kind of look like dark sunken eyes staring at you. It's really uncanny. Oh, and as a bonus, here's something I did in Photoshop in 2019. I can see a lot of problems with it now, but I think I like the way the door came out. In my previous video, I said that the way the grime is distributed, seeping through the crevices in the corners where the walls meet the ceiling, make the visual art style very resemblant of the paintings of Francis Bacon, right? Well, it looks like I was right on the money on that one, because Masahiro Ito himself stated that Francis Bacon was one of his big inspirations. So that was a pleasant surprise. I did not know that in advance. The way the grime seeps down the walls like this makes it seem like the environment is lit from below, kind of like pointing a flashlight up from below your chin into your face when you tell horror stories. This is very apparent in some of the still renders these games have, like the clock tower in the first game. They project the shadows upward, which gives off the vibe that the darkness is like a dark aura. And Silent Hill 3 makes this very apparent here when this aura is actually animated. The colors are very high contrast, lots of red, oranges, and yellows, which give everything in the other world this corrosive, decayed look. And pure blacks are also used a lot as well. The textures being this high contrast make everything seem more corrupted, not less. There's no way to even know what all this grime is sometimes. Some of it is blood, but what is all this black shit on the wall here? And what the hell is James stepping on when he walks through these sections of the prison? And what about this? What is this wall supposed to be? Are these veins? Is this skin? I don't know. There's ambiguity even in the texture work. They are applying the same horror principles everywhere. And Silent Hill 4 honestly has the most repulsive art style of them all. The darkness is gone, but the art style carries the atmosphere in that game. It's the most repulsive because while the other world is not as extreme as, say, Silent Hill 3's version, the way it twists what is familiar makes it the most unnerving Silent Hill in my humble opinion. The worlds Henry navigates through don't shift in and out of the other world temporally like in the previous games, but rather the other world is trying to present itself as normal as it can to Henry when it clearly isn't. Weird shit like hooks that pull up what is supposed to be solid floor like it's tissue, protuberant bulges in walls, trees wrapped up in bloody bandages, weird fleshy hallways intermingling with normal looking sections. This rendition of the other world is more uncomfortable because of the contrast that it presents. The contrast between the normal and the abnormal is too apparent. In this game you can feel the rot and malice invading the world in a way that can only be described as offensive in how obscene and depraved the manner in which it twists and defiles the world is. It's like it's wearing a real world skin, but if you peel that off, it reveals something extremely deformed. This invasion and corruption is exactly what happens. Henry's apartment, as the game progresses, gets more and more dangerous as the other world makes its way into it. At some point, Henry's apartment grows darker. He starts to get creeped out by the things in it, and then the hauntings begin. But returning to Artstyle, all of this combines to make the nightmarish visuals that Silent Hill is iconic for, and spending too much time in these places, I don't think it would be possible to get used to them. They are too uncomfortable to look at, too oppressive. It contributes to how psychologically draining it is to play these games for a long period of time. As for the monster designs, they were designed by Masahiro Ito to look like deformations of the human form. You know deep within that they are supposed to be human, but they don't quite get there. Thus the uncanny valley effect. abstract. Some monsters are designed to be ambiguous. A player looking at them for the first time will most likely ask himself, what the hell is this supposed to be? The flesh lips, for instance, they look like a block of flesh, but they have feet, so it kinda looks like a bed, but the way they move is so smooth and linear. How are they doing that? It's all very unclear. The abstract daddy too is abstract on purpose. It's not supposed to be extremely clear what's happening with the design, but to be implied. It gets you questioning yourself. Is this really what I think it is? At least for a first-time player, that is. But the uncanny vagueness in these human-like shapes maintain that uncanny valley no matter how much you've been exposed to what this symbolism means. It's almost like looking at this picture. You can't really make out what the hell you're looking at, despite it so strongly almost looking like something. Even the first game's enemy design, despite being clearer in their animalistic nature, are somewhat ambiguous. Take the Great Children, for instance. Is this thing on its head a mouth? An eye? The Great Children have no face, but then what is this black pattern where their face was supposed to be? Or the Night Flutter? I have no idea what its head is supposed to be. The shape is very unclear. I can't make out any clear features. These designs are pretty eerie. Some of the enemy designs have very deep blacks obscuring their features, not letting you see what their eyes or mouths look like. I'm not sure if Masahiro Ito took inspiration from this guy, but these designs are eerily similar to some figures you see in the black paintings of Francisco de Goya. The way facial features are obscured looks just like them. Fear of the unseen is at play even here. By obscuring these features in pitch blackness but revealing other spots which look absolutely dreadful, Masahiro Ito triggers your imagination. If what is shown is this bad, which is the first ingredient, signs of danger, then just how frightening are these places that cannot even be clearly displayed? The second ingredient, a lack of information. Although these visuals don't really translate into the game's 3D models very well at all, the point is that the design philosophy was present and it was very deliberate on Team Silent's part. The mocking of the human figure, aside from their uncanny nature, to me also conveys something worse, and that's perfectly communicated in the ghost victims of Silent Hill 4. Something about their faces and their decayed designs give me a feeling of absolute hopelessness and suffering, which is actually what's going on in the lore. They look sickly and miserable. These people were murdered by Walter Sullivan and are damned to roam his other worlds in anguish for eternity. The abstractness of the artwork here allows my mind to conjure up an impression of what they're going through that's far worse than could be described in words. It's the same feeling I get when looking at some of these dark artworks. Art has that property to it. It does a better job at approximating the pure thoughts of the artists, their pure subjective experiences. And I say subjective, not in the gay, leftist, postmodernist sense that there are no absolute truths, everything is subjective. No, not in that way. I mean subjective as in the fact that we'll never see someone else's thoughts, feelings, images from their mind's eye, because they exist solely in their minds. They are immaterial. There are synapses and electrical signals in your brain that correspond to them, but they are not your thoughts and feelings themselves. But art does a pretty good job of getting close to conveying what the artist's pure thoughts are. It gets way closer than a literal description would. A lot would be lost in translation that way, but art is much better at that. And since we touched on the subject of written text, time to go over the writing. Not the writing of the plot or the story or anything like that. No, I mean the literal text you read in these games. Even the text uses these principles to entice dread. The multiple memos you can find throughout the games often use combinations of words that, when put within the oppressive, dreadful atmosphere, they create fear. There are many different types of text in these games, ranging from cryptic poems to gossip and news reporting, and for the sake of this video's scope, I'll focus on the latter, on the more matter-of-fact writing. Take this moment from Silent Hill 2, up to that point, the most severe part of James's journey. For James, preceding his descent into the deepest, most desolate place yet. The situation is dire. Maria just died and Laura has run off somewhere, so everything seems almost hopeless. The town is engulfed in total pitch black darkness, a visual we hadn't seen yet outdoors until now. So the mind of the player is primed to expect bad things. And then James drops these words. Is this your way of taking? Taking what? The sentence is left incomplete on purpose to activate your imagination. Taking everything from me? Taking revenge? I'm not sure, but the phrasing is ominous, so the only things my mind can snap to are bad things. There's a term called transderivational search. It's a mechanism of the mind in which, whenever it is presented with vague descriptions, incomplete information, it automatically, without you wanting to or not, searches for the first thing it can to make any sense of it. So when someone tells you, I think I saw a strange shape outside my window last night, what picture comes to your mind? To me, it's just a black silhouette of an apparition, something like this. But for other people, it could be a completely different image because the description was so vague. But what Silent Hill does is, through its atmosphere and context, it nudges your imagination in the direction that's most horrifying. If I say, his face looked weird, and you and me were standing in a circus festival, the most likely picture that surfaces is probably that of a clown. If the context is a hospital, the image of someone looking sickly on their face. If the context is Silent Hill, probably some deformed monster. The text in Silent Hill does this frequently. Some of the memos are pretty creepy. One of my favorites is the magazine James finds in the prison. It tells the story of the Little Baroness, the ship that disappeared in Toluca Lake. It goes all the way to make sure you understand how strange this event was. Nobody was ever found, nor the ship. But then it tells you something even weirder happened some other time. But the pages were torn out. We can't read about this stranger incident. What could be stranger than the Little Baroness incident? Not only does it entice curiosity, the mind of the player was already primed by the previous story to imagine something extremely scary about this new event we can't read about. And this text is foreboding because later we actually go to Toluca Lake. So having to row through these waters, remembering what that article said about the Little Baroness, is pretty concerning. Now, take the threatening message James finds in Neely's bar once he goes back there during the dark. It wasn't there before, it's written in blood in typical Silent Hill fashion. The atmosphere is ominous as hell as you walk there in the dark, and you suddenly see this. Notice how it at no point whatsoever tells James that he might be going to hell, but everyone knows that's what that message implies because of the context of everything at that moment. The mind goes to the worst possible autocomplete because the atmosphere is set up in such a horrible way in this part of the game. Or the letter James finds shortly after. This one is packed with creepy implications. It starts with a warning. Great. It mentions this abyss again. With our imaginations already primed by how dark and desolate the town looks at that moment, this abyss can only be even darker and more vast. I knew, but did nothing. It made me uneasy to have such a thing near. Uneasy. Such a thing. Nudging us to think this key is hiding something so bad that even the key's presence itself is framed as absurd. I also saw that thing. I fled, but the museum was sealed as well. Now no one dares to approach that place. What horrible thing could cause an entire museum to be sealed forever and never approached by anyone ever again? Pyramid Head? Maybe, but the words used make this thing feel even worse than him. And a final warning, the most ominous so far, implying James' next destination is so horrifying it might be his final damnation. So anything your mind can conjure will be worse than the actual thing. This is Horror 101. Again, the player's next destination is this very museum, so the dread is created before you even arrive at the place. There's one more notable example of this. Heather in the subway finds a clipped article talking about how someone died at Hazel Station, and then she finds another clipping talking about poltergeists and hauntings and shit. And guess where Heather has to go next? Yes, this very Hazel Station. I'm sure nothing bad could happen there, right? So the player can feel very at ease here. For sure, there are no ghosts, they don't exist, they can never harm you, right? Don't look over your shoulder. You don't need to. Back when I was extremely retarded and I went on r/no sleep to read creepy stories because I had run out of good creepypasta to read, and 4chan's export had already turned into a full-blown psychiatric ward for schizophrenics, it was an awful experience looking back at it, because I had to sift through a mountain of garbage to find stories that were written similarly to the texts I see in Silent Hill. Their stories' dialogue was so bad, their descriptions of horrors were too descriptive, like the scary monster had no eyes and its long fingers had also super long black fingernails. Its hair was long and dark, blah blah blah. Oh my god, I saw a ghost of a little girl with long black hair covering her face and it was so spooky. Oh god, it makes me cringe just remembering this. I actually went there recently to see if things had improved, but no, it's even worse now. Normies should give up on writing horror forever. They go to the movies to watch their 999th shitty jump scare fast horror movies with little girl ghosts, and they think that's scary. These people are not human, which is why I'll always treasure the OG Silent Hill games, because they do everything right in this regard, and many others. Take how creepy the man on the telephone's description of Stanley the Stalker is.
I'm not your beloved Stanley either. He's underground now. His new name is Number 7.
He's underground now, implying he's dead and buried, or even worse, buried alive. His new name is Number 7, implying that he's been turned into an inanimate object. The way it's written is not explicitly saying that he's dead, but it conjures a dreadful feeling. If he instead said something like, he's in the underground floor, first, the definite article "the" describes the word underground too much, makes you think of the lower floors of the hospital, and eliminates the possibility of you thinking of a buried man. The word floor, though, neutralizes any dread from underground, makes you skip any of the creepy possibilities, and you just think of the basement floors. Pretty regular stuff. In the end, it sounds simple to write vague horror, but it's not easy in practice. You have to be very good with words to pick and choose which words to include and exclude from your writing in order to manipulate the reader's mind and take it precisely where you want it to go. I'm not pretending I'd be able to do it. I've tried writing horror before, and every single time it sounds good right as I'm done writing, but as I wake up the next day with a refreshed brain, I look at it and I go, what the fuck is this shit? This is cringe, and I just delete the file. But I can still tell when something succeeds at being creepy or not. Either over-describing or under-describing are both problems. When over-describing, like I said before, it becomes too specific and it doesn't allow your mind to go to the worst potential picture. When under-describing, the writing becomes too vague, which makes it uninteresting. Failing to trigger your attention will fail to trigger your imagination, which is the case with all the artsy-fartsy walking sims that try too hard to be poetic. They just come off as pretentious, vague for the sake of being vague. If you're into pretty prose or poetry, fine, but to anyone who's not looking specifically for that, it's just boring. The next example I want to explore is also from Silent Hill 3. In the Borley haunted mansion, the eerie voice that sounds just like Leonard Wolf warns you in this dingy-ass room that the spiky mechanism of death on the ceiling is malfunctioning. It drops on your head just short of killing you, which it does on hard mode if you don't duck by going across this place in the ready combat stance. And not Leonard tells you that it wasn't supposed to stop there. The absolute gall in his voice, the taunting, it displays the level of malice of the other world. It's almost as existentially offensive as the other worlds from Silent Hill 4. Creepier than this, though, is how just earlier the voice tells you that the floor might give way, and beneath the floorboards there's nothing. What a choice of words. The player before this has been traversing spaces where the only thing they stand on is a flimsy chain link fence or grating, and below it is only a black void of nothingness. Your mind therefore is already primed to picture something like this if the right keywords are used. I personally have always wondered, is there anything at the bottom of these chasms, or are they truly bottomless? As we know, Silent Hill doesn't really follow any laws of physics, so yeah. The voice here then and when it's under describing what's below the floorboards as a simple nothing, nudges my mind towards the most unnerving possibility that you could just fall into an endless black abyss for eternity. That would certainly be one depiction of hell that I do my best to avoid. So now that we know how Silent Hill's brand of psychological horror works a little better, let's go over a few more set pieces before I wrap the video up that were made with the intent to bug the hell out of the player. One of my favorites is the classic, the Alchemilla Hospital elevator scare. You're trying to find a way into the inner hospital, but every door is locked. You go down to the creepy basement, power up the elevator, and you start going floor by floor. First floor, locked, as you already know. Second floor, nope, can't even get past the lobby. You go up to the last one, the third floor, and the door is also locked. But this time, something strange happens. The music escalates. Why is it doing that? You could even not notice it, but I'm sure your body would. Then stumped, Harry goes back into the elevator and ooh, what is this? What is this? That button wasn't there before. No, it wasn't. There's no way. Was it? Some people don't even realize what happened. And those who do, like I did back then in my first playthrough, go, oh fuck, this is bad. You know in your gut that this is wrong. This does not belong here. The last time something weird like this happened was in the other world in the school. When something unexplainable like this happens, you know it's bad. But we have no choice but to step into a place that's not supposed to be. As you may know, the meaning of the number 4 in Japanese culture is death. It's pronounced as she, the same pronunciation for the character that means death. This number has an alternative, more common pronunciation, yon, because she comes from Chinese, and also because of this superstition. Many buildings in Japan, especially hospitals, avoid giving the 4th floor the number 4. They just skip it for the same reason. The significance of this set piece is even creepier for Japanese people. This floor does not exist in reality. As you walk down the hallway, the doors audibly lock behind you, taunting you. There's no turning back. You can't go back to the safety of the normal world, and the hallway gets progressively darker to make things even better. The music adds one layer of tension for each area you traverse, building up that dread one step at a time. Once you descend to the 3rd floor, the set piece reaches its climax. The music is now horrifying, and you see a new type of enemy, one fucker you've never seen before. The dread is at its maximum, and they add the fear of the unknown on top of it. I don't know how I was able to play this as a kid and not have a heart attack. Oh, and look, the 4th floor ceases to exist, with only a wall left where there was a staircase before. Very eerie shit. A very similar thing happens in Silent Hill 3 after Heather talks to Leonard Wolf, also in a hospital. I'm sure this is some kind of nod to what they did in the first game. Well, Leonard tells you to
Help you?
Locked up in here, and I must stop Claudia.
Where are you now?
I'm not sure myself, but the door is at the end of the hall on the 2nd floor. I think I can be of help to you.
But wait, I've scoured this whole hospital and I'm pretty sure there's no door there. I checked the map and yes, everything is explored. What the hell is going on? There's also something extremely suspicious in the way he said it. He says he's not sure where he is, but he's very sure of the existence of the door. Not a door, no, the door. Almost as if he actually knows exactly where he is and is inviting you to come closer. It's a very off-putting sentence. So before the player even gets there, they already have a sense that something's not right here. So you arrive there and yes, there is a door here. Was it here before? No, it wasn't. How could it be? I would have explored this. See, there's nothing on the map, nothing indicating that there's a door. So the player understands that they are about to enter, again, someplace that is not supposed to be. I've heard before people referring to the other world as somewhere else. And that that is creepy in a vague way. It's like you're taking a wrong turn, stepping somewhere you were not supposed to, at the wrong place at the wrong time, basically. And the way you slip into the other world out of reality like this is very creepy. The same thing happens in the school. Harry goes into the clock tower expecting to climb up, but instead the ladder goes down. He climbs down, descends a little more, and then climbs up and surfaces back at the same place he was before. No, this is somewhere else. Somewhere sinister. I like this much more over the direct otherworld transitions that we get later. The way they did this is very dream-like. I don't know if you've ever had a lucid dream, but this is pretty accurate to how one enters a lucid dream. I've had several of these, and every time it was when I was going back to bed after taking a leak, and every single time it was a seamless transition from waking reality into a dream. There was no losing of consciousness in between. It's a very interesting experience. I might tell in more detail in the future, but Silent Hill in these subtle transitions captured it pretty accurately. I don't know if anyone in the team had experience with this, but this is psychological horror. The Team Silent guys had an understanding of the human mind. These experiences were made for the player to think that there is something wrong. It's all to evoke that gut feeling of something not being right that comes with dread of what is coming next. And so in Silent Hill 3, Heather finds this room full of mannequins, and this set piece is all about the flavor text, because it's in this text that you can hear how uneasy Heather feels about all these headless mannequins. The setup for the scare is in the flavor text, and if you walk to the right side of the room, the mannequin with the head gets decapitated off screen. The fact that blood splattered out of this supposedly inanimate mannequin activates the uncanny valley. It gets even closer to resembling a human, but not quite there. It screams with Heather's voice. Perhaps the symbolism here is that the headless ones are all the kids that bullied Alessa and the cult that wanted her to do all sorts of things for them, never leaving her at peace, which culminated in her death. Heather finds in the hospital a lot of diaries that were left behind with a little doll next to him. They're being left there by this Stanley figure, a maniac who's obsessed with Heather. We never get to see what he looks like. He's never shown. Fear of the unseen, everyone. We only notice how his diary keeps changing locations, as if he's a ghost moving it around. But the feeling that someone is stalking the player in this dark building is unnerving. There's no way new players could know if they would suddenly meet this figure when turning a dark corner in the building. The prison in Silent Hill 2 is full of things that subvert expectations. The sprint down the impossibly long staircase makes you question whether you're making any progress, or if you're in a Super Mario 64 situation, looking like you're descending but never leaving your starting position. But once you realize that something might be wrong, you've run down so far already. Most people don't even try to turn back. They keep going down with only the hope that it will lead somewhere. Exactly what's going on in James's head. The foghorn gets louder. What am I going to see at the bottom of these stairs? More terror. When James jumps down the hole at the bottom, he finds himself in a perfectly circular well with nowhere to go. He can't climb these walls, so one would ask themselves, was I not supposed to jump down this hole? Is this a bad ending? Did I softlock? I've seen this question asked by many players, and it's panic-inducing.
Two obscure worlds in which you always feel lost, always feel surrounded by a void, always feel full of doubt, and doubt is what gives rise to fear.
How are you gonna get out of here? By the way, something else I forgot to mention in the DMake video is that it completely ruined this. The walls on all sides are the same tired breakable wall you know you can break, so you just break them one at a time and you find the exit. There's no thinking involved whatsoever. It's not a curveball, it doesn't confuse anyone, and it also ruined the cool water reflection that makes the well seem like an infinitely expanding abyss, like that circular light library. You know the one I'm talking about. So yes, shame on you, Bloober team. Again, here you're forced to walk all the way to the back of this unusually long shower room to pick up an item, which leaves James's back exposed to the darkness thanks to the camera angle. At this point, the game has already established that things can happen suddenly after you pick up key items, like here. The camera, again, almost taunting you, tempting you to go for that item. It looks like an ambush, but nothing happens. Who cares? The point was the terror, and it created that perfectly. And here are some of my favorite places in Silent Hill 2, the cell blocks. In these rooms, there's an unseen entity which repeatedly thumps on the wall, presumably, while repeating over and over the word ritual in a very low-pitched voice. These enemies, quote-unquote, are actually invisible. Even if you manage to manipulate the camera to get a good look inside the cell they're in, you can't see them. But James sees them. He sees them and he can shoot and kill them. Whatever this thing is, it's very tall. You can see the way James tilts his head up and points his gun up at it. The horror is implied. It's not shown to you directly. If you shoot it a few times, it screams. Just like a human, it drops to the ground and starts groaning. Very human-like noises. This is concerning because for the two people on the planet who haven't played the OG or the remake, what this implies for James is, well, not good. It doesn't help that when you walk into this cell, you're locked in, you can't leave. It sounds like the thumping is coming from this cell. Because it's so loud, even though it's in fact not. It's in the neighboring cell, but this is a very bad spot to be in. And one final set piece. There are many others, but if I were to cover all of them, this video would be 3 hours long. This one's a classic jump scare. To me, the perfect jump scare is the silent one, but that's not easy to pull off. Because for those to be effective, they need to be carried by tense atmosphere. And that's the hard part of making horror. And you can't just flash a spooky screamer image out of nowhere for no reason without build-up. That would also be cheap and lazy, as well as ineffective. But the next greatest thing is the natural jump scare, where no extra sound effects are used to accentuate the scare. There's only noises you'd expect from the things that are happening on screen. Going back to the first game's Otherworld locker room, this set piece is a complete subversion of expectations because you've been here before, you know what happened to that cat, and now that we're in hell, how much worse is this time gonna be? So when you arrive in the room, the anticipation was already created without them doing anything. The noise is now slightly different from before. Keep in mind the ambience here, if you can hear it. It's important. And look at the camera, it cuts twice and both times it refuses to show the player what is in the back where the noise is coming from until, again, the player is dangerously close to it. Harry taps the locker, the ambience goes quiet. And it slowly opens to reveal nothing. Just blood everywhere. Nothing happens and the room is eerily quiet. Dead silent now. And as you start heading back, the corpse falls out of the locker. No extra artificially loud sound effects to try and amplify the jump scare. Nope, just what you'd expect from this. And the ambience track comes back to restart the tension immediately. And for this reason, because it's sincere, it's not annoying. You were given enough reason to expect this jump scare to happen even after the fake out, because the music stopped. And in good game design fashion, you hear the sound of the key that the corpse was holding as it falls on the floor to remind you to look for it once you take back control of Harry. In the end, the jump scare itself wasn't that much worse than the one that happened in the normal school, even though all signs pointed that it would be because of the environment. All the set pieces I covered throughout this video don't feel like they are intruding on gameplay, which is too much to ask of modern horror games, unfortunately, which will often take control away from you when the jump scare happens, something that happens too often, for instance, in RE7, 8, and 9. Also, because of the fixed camera, it's very hard to miss them when they happen, which is not the case if you have an over-the-shoulder camera. When playing these horror games, including the remake, I was looking at the wrong place when things like this happened several times, and so the set piece failed to land. So learn from the classics. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. When a horror game does the extra work to scare you, not simply with jump scares, loud noises and gore, but with clever atmosphere and setups, it enters the realm of the unnerving. This type of horror is long-lasting, haunting, and it's hard to overcome through desensitization, if not impossible. It's a horror that has barely, if any, resolution. Maybe the reason I keep going back to these Silent Hill games is because of this lack of resolution. These games are not afraid of keeping tensions high with barely any relief, and they don't pull any disturbing punches. Silent Hill was a genre-defining game. It took inspirations from some of the best psychological horror media out there still to this day, but from those inspirations, it made its own thing. There's not a single town in media as scary as Silent Hill. Not Twin Peaks, not Raccoon City, and probably thanks to it being a fruit of its time, with Resident Evil being its competition, it didn't go down the route of the fever dream. It kept things grounded, just realistic enough for the world building to be enjoyable. While still being successful in the realm of psychological horror, these games are still debated to this day. It's been decades since they came out. New details, new interpretations, they're always being found, and it's special. I think if it was just another psychological horror thing, then people wouldn't care. They would just watch Lynch movies. But these games offer a horror that is not found anywhere else, and they're pretty damn enjoyable to play as well, which is something that's rare in games from the psychological horror genre. Most of them are just fever dreams. Now, I know that's the definition of psychological horror. As long as it explores the psychology of the characters involved, that's enough to qualify them. The part of manipulating the audience's psychology is not really necessary, but without that, then it just feels like regular horror, to be honest. It's just the nature of the monster that's different. I don't know, I'm not satisfied with just that. In a lot of Silent Hill games, unlike in regular psychological horror, in which you usually explore the mind, the demons of the main character, you explore the minds of other characters in these games. Like 1 and 4, you're not fighting the demons in Harry's mind or Henry's mind. You're fighting through the nightmare of Alessa and Walter Sullivan, respectively. And what's the difference, in essence, between that and fighting, I don't know, aliens? Something that is completely external to you, the main character you play as. Yet, these games are still magnificent psychological horror games. To me, the most important part in psychological horror should be the one that manipulates, that tinkers with the viewer's mind and perception. And Silent Hill does this splendidly. Much of this was lost in the Silent Hill 2 remake, and I'm pretty curious, not in a good way, to see how Bloober Team is going to botch this Silent Hill 1 remake. After all, that game's blueprint is way more incomplete, which means that they will have more freedom to do their own stupid shit to it. Plus, now that the brainless normie masses have already accepted them as their new gods of horror, they don't have to worry about trying to please the original fans of Silent Hill anymore. And being normies themselves, Bloober Team probably only cared about Silent Hill 2 from the beginning. So yeah, that's gonna be a shit show most likely. There's a small chance that it won't, that it would be good, but I wouldn't bet on that. I sure as hell am not excited to see how they're gonna ruin every single set piece from that game with their lazy, stale, over-the-shoulder camera bullshit. I'm sure the normies will love it and say it's the best thing ever created, but anyone who's not a Hylic should be curbing their expectations. Good thing for me then that if I want to be scared or unnerved, since the original games always hit the spot no matter how many times I play them, because it does psychological horror in the proper way, to me at least. They won't ever grow old and stale. So I hope you guys like this retrospective, a little bit different from the usual Silent Hill retrospective. I didn't focus on the symbolism. There's already 100,000 different video essayists that cover these things, and that's it. I might cover Silent Hill again if I get any new ideas, but if not, then until Konami drops the newest annual dog shit, since now that Silent Hill has been reduced to a purely corporate product, it needs to be produced on a regular basis. I'll probably play Crimson Desert to review it. Maybe it's gonna be a positive review, who knows? Doesn't look like that game's shaping up to be a complete disaster pre-launch. Maybe I'll try my hand at streaming soon as well. But for now, that's it. See you, take care.